So there's really nothing that highlights the fact that college football is still a highly regionalized sport, quite like the Heisman Trophy voting, because every year you see the Heisman Trophy voting results as if it's like the presidential election from 1860, where this guy wins this portion of the country, this guy wins that portion of the country, etc. Very rarely, except in those cases where somebody just had a far and away they were the best college football player. Joe Burrow, wins every region of the country or whatever, and almost after the award is handed out, they go through kind of like a region by region map of who won what area, like it is a presidential election. Like you got Steve Kornacki at the big board poking around, going, okay, well, Jaden Daniels won the South, and Michael Penix Jr. won the Pacific Northwest, and Marvin Harrison Jr. won the Northeast, and all of those things. It just really highlights the fact that, and I don't know how I feel about this, whether I think it's a good thing or a bad thing, of whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing, whether the sport is fractured and regionalized as it is. Like, does the Northeast care about college football? No. For the majority of the West Coast, do they care about college football? Not especially. Does the Southeast and the Midwest care about college football? A whole hell of a lot. The majority of the East Coast, Mid-Atlantic, not really, no. So it is regionalized. And I think that's okay, because I don't think, for one of the bright spots, I think, of college football, and maybe one of the good things about college football not having a singular commissioner who's trying to get everybody pulling in one direction, is they're not trying to expand to places that we've been underserved or whatever. Like if Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, etc., they don't really care about college football. After 150 years of the sport existing at the highest levels, then it's probably just not for them, and that's okay. It matters in the South. South really cares about college football, and that's okay. The Midwest really cares about college football, and that's awesome. The West Coast, Pacific Coast doesn't really care a whole lot about college football. Now, when USC is good or UCLA is good, yes, more people care, but for the most part, it's an afterthought to other sports, and that's all right. But nothing really highlights that fact quite like the Heisman Trophy voting. And I find it super interesting because you get all of these people who tell you that they're not biased towards one candidate, or they don't favor a player from a certain conference or a certain team, and then the results don't bear that out. That every year that there is a player from the South, whether they win or not, that's who the South votes for. There's a player from the Midwest that, whether or not that player wins, gets some votes. And I find the entire process super interesting, because you see everybody pretty much on Monday on the old tweet machine tweeting out the screenshot that they had submitted their Heisman vote. They are proud and excited to do it, etc. I find that I don't know if the Heisman Trophy asks them, like, hey, please share on social media. And it's become, they really care about the TV product, which I understand to a point. Like, you want people, and you want people to watch. You want there to be intrigue. You need it to matter. And I love the Heisman Trophy because I think it's still, which is fascinating to me, like still the biggest individual award, or the most meaningful maybe individual award that you can win in American sports, which is outrageous to me. Like, you can win gold medals depending on the sport and nobody even have any idea what your name is. You can win the NFL MVP and that doesn't fast track you to the Hall of Fame or anything like that. You win the Heisman Trophy and people will remember you forever. A lot of people will remember you forever. If you win that trophy, you are enshrined as a legend of the sport. And that doesn't like you can win the NFL MVP, and that doesn't enshrine you as a legend of the sport. You can win the NBA MVP. You can win NBA Finals MVP. You can win all sorts of trophies, and nothing defines your legacy in that sports, in the annals of that sports history. But college football, you win the Heisman Trophy, you will be remembered as one of the all-time greats. And I enjoy the allure that comes with that trophy being bestowed upon you. But it has turned into slightly that that they're worried more about the TV show and the TV product than maybe a lot of other things. And I think that's a problem. Like, for instance, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to the Heisman Trophy ceremony on Saturday as we want to ensure that this just isn't a quarterback award. And I think there's some, obviously they're taking the top 4 highest vote getters, but I think there's some help from the voters there too of I want to pretend as if I'm not just going to give this to the top performing quarterback or the quarterback of the best team overall. I've balked at this before on the show if you're a faithful listener. Stetson Bennett was a Heisman Trophy finalist last year. Is Stetson Bennett one of the 4 best players in college football last year? No. But he was the quarterback of the best team, the team who had won the championship the year before, and the team who would go on to win the championship later that year. So you get an invitation to New York. But I think it's going to be important going forward for the Heisman Trophy to invite non-quarterback guests. That do I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is spending the weekend in New York thinking that he's going to win the Heisman Trophy? No, I don't. I don't think Bo Nix is going to New York thinking that he needs to really practice his speech because he probably knows he didn't win the Heisman Trophy. I think it comes down to Michael Penix Jr. and Jaden Daniels. I think Jaden Daniels wins comfortably. Jaden Daniels is going to win the South. I assume Jaden Daniels is going to win the East. Jaden Daniels is going to win the Midwest. I would imagine Michael Penix Jr. wins the West. And Jaden Daniels wins somewhat comfortably, is my guess. I think the Heisman Trophy wishes that people didn't know that. People didn't have that feel. They wish that there was a ton of intrigue around whether it was Michael Penix Jr. Does Michael Penix Jr. get votes taken away from him by Bo Nix? In reality, probably. But, is it going to be Bo Nix? Is it going to be Michael Penix Jr.? Is it going to be Jaden Daniels? Is it going to be Marvin Harrison Jr.? There are so many different options. I don't think that intrigue exists. And that's okay. You used to have to watch the Heisman Trophy ceremony because there was, one, no other way of finding out who won the award. And then, two, there was legitimate intrigue because you hadn't seen damn near every play that player or the 4 or 5 players in attendance had that year. You just weren't exposed to, if you lived in Florida, you probably hadn't seen a whole lot of Washington's games this year. You probably hadn't seen a ton of Oregon, a ton of Ohio State. But the TV landscape has changed the way we look at and view and vote for the Heisman Trophy. And then also the way we perceive the Heisman Trophy, because you have the opportunity. If you want to watch all 12 of LSU's games this year, you have that possibility and opportunity. Even 20 years ago, you didn't have the chance to watch all 12 LSU games unless you lived somewhat close to LSU. You didn't have the chance to watch every Washington or Oregon or Ohio State, Oklahoma, Texas, pretty much outside of Notre Dame. You didn't have the chance to watch everybody's games. And now you do. And so it changes the way we look at the Heisman Trophy. It changes the way we vote for the Heisman Trophy. It changes the lack of intrigue because you know damn good and well that it's going to come down to one of these 2 guys, and it's likely to come down to this guy. So I think it makes it easier but slightly less intriguing because there isn't a whole lot of question of who it's going to be year after year after year. And even when there is, you kind of still get the feeling that one guy has kind of risen above the rest in the Heisman Trophy voting. And so I don't even know when the last Heisman Trophy ceremony was that people were like, man, I don't know who's going to win this thing. I think like maybe Mark Ingram back in 2009 when it was really close between him and Toby Gerhart. Outside of that, I just don't think that there are a whole lot of years and a whole lot of times when you can look back and go, okay, over the course of the last 15 years or so. Not the like Devontae Smith, maybe. Outside of that, there's just not a whole lot of years where it hasn't been somewhat overwhelming that Marcus Mariota was going to be the Heisman Trophy winner, or Baker Mayfield, or I mentioned Joe Burrow earlier. Joe Burrow was as slam dunk of a Heisman Trophy winner as you're ever going to get. It's just the way college football has evolved in the way that we view the trophy. You get the opportunity to watch whoever it is you want to watch, whenever you want to watch them, however you want to watch them. And so it's changed. And that doesn't make it better or worse. It's just different. And that's all right. Now, before I give you my Heisman Trophy, I do want to address, I got a comment on yesterday's video. I've been in a hotel. I don't live in a hotel. I don't live in this hotel. Okay, I'm just in a hotel away from home for work for 10 days. So I don't live in a hotel, okay? I'll be back on Sunday. I'll be back home and ready to chop it up about the results of the Heisman Trophy vote. Like, I don't live in this hotel, all right? I just travel a lot for work, and so I'm in this hotel right now. But I did appreciate, like, somebody's got to pay this dude some more living in a hotel. I don't live here. It is one of those like I got a 2-burner stovetop and a full-size fridge in this hotel room. Yes, it is one of those extended stay hotels, but I don't live here. But I do appreciate your concern for my payment of how much I'm getting paid to do this. I don't live in this hotel, though. So, my Heisman Trophy ballot, if I had one, and I don't have one, I would love one, obviously, but I don't think I could hold it in about who I voted for. Here's why I voted for him, and the Heisman wants you to keep it super secret because they need people to watch the ceremony, but everybody's gonna just find out on Twitter because Jaden Daniels going to win the damn thing. So, I would have voted for Jaden Daniels to win the Heisman Trophy. When I talked about Joe Burrow earlier, Joe Burrow had one of the greatest college football seasons of all time and was a slam dunk Heisman Trophy winner. And Jaden Daniels' numbers are better than that. And that carried a lot of weight with me, that if Joe Burrow had one of, if not the greatest season of all time, and he won the Heisman Trophy. And I realize that is not an apples-to-apples comparison, and it's not fair to judge one vote like a year to a year, because there are, like, you go back in the day, and some of the Heisman Trophy winners are their stats are horrendous. So it's not fair to judge year against year, and I wholly admit that. But Jaden Daniels had better numbers than Joe Burrow did when Joe Burrow was the overwhelming Heisman Trophy winner. That matters to me. Michael Penix Jr., I don't, outside of, throwing for 6 touchdowns against Oregon last weekend, it would have been difficult for him. And I wholeheartedly believe that there is a somewhat West Coast bias there, despite 2 of my 3 final ballot guys being on the West Coast. If Michael Penix Jr. was the quarterback of if they were flipped, if LSU had Michael Penix Jr. and Jaden Daniels was the quarterback of Washington, I think Michael Penix Jr. wins the Heisman Trophy. Because Michael Penix Jr. is the quarterback of, if not the best team, one of the best teams in America. And we've seen the history of that award turn into, it is given to, sometimes, generally, more frequently than not, the quarterback of the best team in the country. So I think if Michael Penix Jr. was an SEC quarterback or a Big Ten quarterback, I believe he wins the Heisman Trophy. I remember the statement from Christian McCaffrey, who you could probably argue should have won the Heisman Trophy, that one of the voters told him, like, hey, you're a hell of a football player. I just never watched your games because they start at 10 o'clock at night. Like, that sucks. Like, that's a bad thing to hear. And now I'm not like, well, I think Michael Penix Jr. at times was punished by having late starts, playing. Yeah, I mean, he had opportunities to shine on a national stage. They played Oregon twice on national TV, for Pete's sake. But you play at some wonky times that not everybody's locked in and glued in on you. That's to your detriment. And then you get kind of a promotional machine behind Jaden Daniels, who is deservedly so one of the front runners, if not the front runner, to win the award. And Michael Penix Jr. got passed. So I don't know that Michael Penix Jr. lost the Heisman Trophy as much as Jaden Daniels just passed him for the Heisman Trophy. Bo Nix, I think, is a tough spot because he played really well, but you lost your two most important games, and that holds a lot of weight and stock to a lot of guys. Generally, and I mentioned this earlier in the season, generally, I try to envision, okay, what does LSU look like without Jaden Daniels? They're still pretty good. Are they 9-3? I don't know. Probably pretty close to it. Is Washington 12-0 without Michael Penix? Probably not. Is Oregon 10-2 without Bo Nix? They're probably pretty close to it, 9-3. So maybe Michael Penix Jr. should have gotten more love on my ballot than he did. But I went Jaden Daniels at number 1 in my Heisman Trophy ballot. And part of that, and I think this factors into it too, that there are a lot of people, a lot of voters, and I think this too, especially like in like general elections or presidential elections. You're not necessarily voting for who you think is going to be the best person for the job. You're voting for the person that you think is already going to win despite your vote. And I think there's a little bit that there with Jaden Daniels, that like I think Jaden Daniels is going to win even if I vote for Michael Penix Jr. If you believe Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best player in college football, put him at number 1. If you believe that, or the most, and part of it, like it's most outstanding player, there are a lot of different ways to look at it and a lot of things to juggle. Most outstanding player, most valuable player, best player. Are all of those things the same thing? I don't know. I don't think so. But it's definitely something you've got to like juggle in your own mind. And so for me, when I weighed it all out, I would have voted for Jaden Daniels, but I don't have a Heisman Trophy vote. So this has all just been a pointless exercise. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. We'll be back on Sunday. We'll recap the Heisman Trophy victor. There's not multiple. The Heisman Trophy victor. Was it right? Was it wrong? And we'll talk about the regionalized voting. Who won what area? And just how big of a slam dunk or how close it was. We'll chat about it all on Sunday. Not from this hotel room on the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all that great college football content we're pumping out here at Saturday Glory. If you are listening on the podcast, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. We'll see you next time here on the Daily Huddle with Saturday Glory.